So we're focusing on sanctifying time. As we said, the act of sanctifying, lekadesh, means to reveal the experience's inherent holiness, because everything in this world has an inherent holiness, because this world is created by God, and therefore every aspect of the world innately contains holiness, and our service is to reveal that holiness. The Torah says in the Midrash that the Torah says that I am God's tool craft tool for creating the world. The Zohar says, "Histakel b'oraisa bara alma," that Hashem peered into the Torah and created the world. From this we could understand that the Torah is a blueprint for all of existence. But then comes a question: a blueprint is necessary in the initial phases of the construction. As the commentaries say, that just like a king who builds a metropolis, creates a plan, a blueprint, and so on and so forth, and then he looks at the blueprint in order to create, so did God utilize the Torah in order to create the world. But then comes the question, the blueprint is necessary in the initial phases of construction. Why would the blueprint be necessary hundreds, thousands of years after the construction? In other words, why do we need the Torah today? But as the explanation is given in Hasidus, the world was created for the Jewish people to come and utilize the Torah in order to reveal the inherent holiness of every experience. For example, in the Torah it says, "Ukshartem otam le'otzetchem," you should bind them upon your arms, referring to the tefillin. The inner dimension of this is that God created a hand in order for us to put on tefillin. It's not that first Hashem created the human beings, and now God says, okay, so now that I've created them in such a manner, what do I do? What do I give them to do with their bodies, with their monies, with their time? But rather, each and every aspect of the universe, of the world, of the micro world, which is called mankind, is created to reveal the inherent holiness of their bond with Hashem, with the neshama, through the Torah. The same applies when it comes to time, when it comes to space. The fact that Hashem created the world, olam milashon ha'elam, concealment, the world is etymologically related to the word concealment, is for us to come and utilize it in order to reveal the holiness. We spoke about this before. The Midrash says, the Gemara says, and we see in chapter 22 of Tehillim, that when Esther came first and foremost to perform her mission on behest of the Jewish people sent by Mordechai to barge into her husband Achashverosh, she broke protocol. She fasted for 3 days. She davened for 3 days. She had the entire Jewish people fast and daven on her behalf. She walked in with all the spiritual bravado, with all the Ruach HaKodesh to save her people. But as soon as she walked in, she saw a statue, and for whatever reason, upon seeing that statue, all of her spiritual bravado escaped her. And that's when she pleaded with Hashem, Keli, Keli lama zavtani, as it's written in chapter 22 of Tehillim. My God, why have you forsaken me? But as Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch explains, we could read the word lama zavtani, why did you forsake me? Or lema, for what? What does it mean, for what? We spoke about this many times, but we have to look at it as the upcoming holiday, Shavuot, Zman Matan Toratenu, the time that Hashem gave us our Torah. What does that mean, lema zavtani? But as we just said before, each and every one of our neshamot are sent into this world in order to transform the part of the world that belongs to the neshama from darkness into magnificent light. Lema zavtani means, what is the shlichut here? What is the mission here? I'm not asking why do you do this. The why is because you need me to feel this emptiness inside myself. But when I feel that emptiness, that void, what do I do about it? How do I utilize it in order to serve you, in order to bring light into this world? Every minute, every experience gives us that opportunity to perform our shlichut in this world. And what is your ultimate shlichut? As the Midrash says, and the Alter Rebbe brings in the Tanya, to make a dwelling place for God in the below. Tell you a story. One of my colleagues shared this, that in his shul in Israel, there was a dispute between two Jews. And one of the Jews was a hothead. So when the hothead Jew saw this other guy in the shul, he started going off on him and berating him and just, you're this and you're that. And he tried to get up and he wouldn't let him. And he did this in front of everyone. What did the Jew who was berated, what did he do? What was his response? So, as it says, that Hashem hangs the entire world on silence. We know that the Torah says that anyone who hears their disgrace and there remains silent. In other words, somebody disgraces them, and instead of reacting, instead of defending or offending, they just remain silent. That Hashem cleans them from iniquity. But not only that, as we learned before, that when someone hears the disgrace being mentioned, and not only they're silent, but they give a bracha, that blessing is very, very intense. So this guy who heard him, who was listening and his disgrace and so on and so forth, looks all around the shul, and he sees that there is a young man who's been married for several years, but for one reason or another he couldn't have children. So he turns to that man and says, I give you a blessing that Be'ezrat Hashem you should have healthy children. 11 months later, he had twins. Now, let's think about this idea. Let's think about this story for a second. This is a localized story. It's a very amazing story. But let's think how many people were affected by this story. The one who heard the disgrace, had the shlichut over there, had his mission. And what was the mission? If you are allowing this to be streamed at me, there must be a shlichut here. There must be a mission here. What's the point of the Torah? The point of the Torah is to show us how each experience that by divine providence is being created right now has an ultimate mission attached to it. And we're the boots on the ground that have to We have to bring this mission out. We have to do the mission. The Torah tells us when someone hears the disgrace and they remain silent and they can give a bracha, means that when someone hears the disgrace, this should immediately open up the question mark, what's the shlichut here? Who do I bless? If Hashem is making me hear this now, it means that I have the power to generate a bracha. So what's the shlichut? Instead of focusing, woe is me, I can't believe, and this and that, and how dare you, how dare she, there must be a holy reason here. This is the ultimate thinking good. Thinking good doesn't mean cup half empty, half full, because that's already post-processing. The cup is half empty, then I need to tell myself a story. No, it's not half empty, it's half full, it's half liquid, it's half salt, it's half gas. Those are post-processing. And as brought down in the Rebbe brought in several letters, and we know this, the human beings are affected by what they see. And what we see, it makes a bigger impression on us immediately than even what we know. So yeah, you're seeing a cup half empty, half full, and you have to tell yourself this, but in the back of your mind, you know, oh, excuse me, it's half empty. I would like more coffee in here. I would like more juice in here, more water in here, whatever. But it's half full. It's great. But deep down inside, I want more coffee.
When you hear the word but,
that's exactly it.
there are no buts.
Thinking positive means this is God's world. If this is what God's giving me right now, this is full of my mission. And this is what I'm meant to engage right now. The Yetzer Hara will always make us focus on what we don't have, what's not available. But the Yetzer Tov always shows us, but this is what you do have, and this is what you need to utilize. Time and space. Being positive doesn't mean post-processing. Thinking positive is like thinking as a Jew, as the Torah tells you, everything is God. There's no negativity. It seems that way. Well, that's your shlichus. That's your mission. In this time and space lays your mission. It's just obscured by several layering. But those layering, as Alter Rebbe says, when you hug a king, it doesn't matter if you're hugging the king when he's disrobed, or he is robed with 20 suits. You're hugging the king. The situation, every single situation, is Hashem, divine providence, being brought to you right now, to you, in front of you, because of you, for you. It's layered up, but what's the difference? This is God. We have to view every aspect of our lives in this way. This is the ultimate thinking positive. Thinking positive is thinking as a Jew. There's God here. What does he need? So in order for us to utilize our time correctly in this world, we need to first and foremost start strategizing our time. First and foremost, we have to start really considering, what do we spend the most of our time focus upon? Throughout the day, where is my mind? What am I thinking about throughout the day? What are the patterns? Are they holy? Are they allowing my light to pass through and through? Or are they dense and they're keeping me shut down from doing what I need to do? We have to think, a week comes, a week goes. Here we are, almost Erev Shabbat, Shavuot, 49 days just passed, almost from the second day of Pesach. And we have to ask, how much have we accomplished? And what are we accomplishing? And the most important, are we accomplishing that which our soul descended into this world in order to accomplish? When we just think for a split second that our souls descended from the highest of heights into the lowest of the low, it's a humongous risk for God. It's a humongous investment for God. And for what purpose? The previous Rebbe once, when he came to visit America in 1930, stopped by one of his students who had moved to America and was very successful in the garment industry. And the previous Rebbe stopped by his office, by the warehouse, unexpectedly. And the student's name was Goldstein. Upon seeing the Rebbe himself coming to his office, Rebbe, what are you doing here? And the Rebbe said, word got out in the old country that you are very successful in the garment industry and the tailoring industry. He says, Baruch Hashem. So I had a button that needs to be fixed. So I decided to come to America, to you, to fix it. He says, Rebbe, what do you mean you came to America to fix it, to fix my button, your button? You came it doesn't make sense that you came all the way to America, to New York, to fix a button. Says the Rebbe to him, you're right. But does it make sense to you that your soul descended all the way into this world to fix buttons? Is that what you're here for? In other words, there's a question. Every moment that we're alive, our soul is being brought into this world from nothing to something. And for what purpose? Lema, for what? What's the shlichut here? What is the mission? What are we doing here? And this begins with our paradigm. Begins with a way that we think about ourselves, about our purpose in this world, who we are and what we are. Because as we spoke about in the first lesson in this series, every day and every hour and every minute has its particular energy that is created for that particular time, that particular situation, for a particular mission. When that minute, with that hour, with that day passes, we might replicate the day. There's going to be another Thursday at 1 o'clock. Fine. Replicating. It's never going to be the original, because that original has came and went. And that energy and that potential will never come back. And for this reason, we need to live in the present. We must live in the present. Because if we don't live in the present, and like we spoke about in the previous lesson, ruminating over past events, the good old days, or what's going to happen in the future, takes us away from living in the now. Because sometimes a person doesn't utilize their time correctly, out of the erroneous thought, what could I already accomplish right now? What could I already do in this short period of time? Because a person can change all of reality in one split second. And we just mentioned this story. In that scenario where the person could have got so offended, so taken aback, so like, I can't believe he's saying this about me. In that split second, instead of going about what should have been a negative day and then going huffing and puffing later on. And he utilized that one moment to give a bracha, which resulted in twins, with 2 new Jews being born. Future parents, future leaders, future spouses, future... How many people did he affect in one moment? In the most obscure moment. We can't imagine how much power wield in a split second. But we need to view everything from the lens of the Torah. Even when it becomes completely convoluted, in this convolution, this is where the mission is. We know the Gemara in a tractate of Avodah Zarah tells us about a story regarding a Jew, Elazar ben Dorduya, who had a knack for sinning. There wasn't a woman of the night that he didn't frequent. Once he went to a particular high-level woman of the night. And while he was with her, she let out air, and then she said, just like the air is not going to revert back to me, so too Elazar, the son of Dorduya, will not come back to the world of the world to come. Lost his share in the world to come. And that really cut into him. So immediately he ran out and started pleading with the sun and the moon, the constellation, daven on my behalf, and they said, we can't. The hills and the mountains, the valleys and the mountains, please daven for me. He says, we can't. And he started pleading with every single aspect of creation, and we can't. We have to daven for ourselves. Eventually, he put his head between his knees and cried for 3 days, and he passed away. When he passed away, a heavenly voice descended and says, Rabbi Elazar, the son of Dorduya, is invited to the world to come. The explanation, what does it mean he davened to the hills, into the mountains, the valleys, into the constellation? It means he was trying to shift the blame. It's not me, it's my mazal. It's not me, it's my parent. It's the parenting that I received. But each time he was said, no, you have to take responsibility. And when he realized that he must take the responsibility, that really penetrated his and revealed his pintele neshama, his quintessential self, which caused him to make a tremendous tshuva in 3 days, to the point that the bat kol, the heavenly voice, pronounced Rabbi Elazar, the son of Dorduya. Not Elazar, Rabbi. To this, Rabbi Yehuda cried and says, there are those who are able to acquire their world to come throughout many days, many years, and there are those who acquire their world to come in chad rega, in one instant. What does that mean? That there was no traditional trajectory for Elazar ben Dorduya to reach that level because of the lifestyle that he accustoms himself to, from being so far and remote from godliness. But in one instant, he transformed all of that. The Arizal tells us that Elazar, the son of Dorduya, was a reincarnation of one of our high priests in the Beit HaMikdash in the Second Temple era. His name was Yochanan Kohen Gadol. And Yochanan Kohen Gadol spent 80 years as a tzaddik, as a Kohen Gadol. And when he turned 80, for one reason or another, he left Judaism. He became a tzduki. For whatever reason, he left. He started denying all of the rabbinical service, all the rabbinical Torah. The Arizal says that Elazar, the son of Durduya, was a reincarnation of Yochanan Kohen Gadol. Why is this necessary to know? Because Yochanan, the high priest, spent 80 years as a tzaddik, and the last moments of his life, he left. For this reason, Elazar ben Durduya, his next incarnation, spent his entirety of his life, the most of his life, sinning. And the last minute he needed to make tshuva. In other words, his entire life of negativity brought him to his ultimate mission for which his neshama came here for. When a person says, "Oh, what can I already do? I spend most of my life in being antagonistic of God, antagonistic. Why would I be able to shift anything at this point?" But this moment in itself is why you were born in this lifetime, why you lived your entire lifetime the way you did. So the last moment you could actually utilize to correct what happened originally. That's al tikra lama lama. What is my shlichut? What is the shlichut right now? What is the mission now that I recognize? What do I do with this? This is what's available to me. Then this is how I need to serve. This is a service in itself. Very interesting. I heard in a Farbrengen that the Ger Rebbe, when he became the Rebbe, he was a very young man. And in the funeral of the previous Rebbe before him, the custom is that the mourner has to walk barefoot between two lines of people so they could comfort him after the funeral, after the actual funeral. It was a very cold day and there was a lot of snow on the ground. And the Hasidim turned to the young Rebbe and pleaded with him, "Rebbe, surely you don't have to take your shoes off here. It's very cold. You could get sick." And the Rebbe says, "There must be a Rav. We have to ask him over here. He turns to the Rav of the community and says, "What's your halacha? Do I need to take it off or not?" He says, "No, halacha is halacha. You have to take your shoes off." So he proceeded to take his shoes off and started walking between the two lines. But right before he took his first step, a coat went flying onto the ground. So the first step, the Rebbe's foot will go on the coat and not on the bare ground. And immediately all the Hasidim took their coats and started throwing on the ground so the Rebbe could walk on the coats. Who threw the first coat? It was none other than the town's pauper. But within 1 year, the town pauper became one of the wealthiest people in town. And the former pauper, now turned to be one of the greatest philanthropists, came to the Rebbe and says, "Rebbe, I recognize this was a miracle. But in what merit?" He said, the Rebbe responded to him that when you threw your coat that second, you gave everything you had. That's your entire possession. And what do you already own? The only thing he owns is a coat. Because you give everything you had, mida keneged mida, measure for measure, Hashem gives you everything you need. In 1 second, a person is able to shift everything. It's erroneous to think that, well, I wasted so much time, or I already messed up, or this and that, to ruminate over things that there's no control over. But rather, what is the mission now? What can I utilize now? That's what it means to live in the now. To be clear vision, clear-headed, based on who you are and what you're here to accomplish. And Mendel, one of my colleagues told this story in Verbringen, and Mendel came to Belgium to fundraise and so on and so forth, and he was Verbringen by the Chabad house. We all know Mendel spent 8 grueling years in Siberia and in the gulags, and he was part of the underground, and we spoke many times about him. As the Verbringen, Mendel looks at the clock, and this clock was a novelty clock where there was the time. It wasn't digital; it was analog, but it was every single minute. There was a paper or what's that called? Like a little cardboard that turned around and told you the time. It was flipped. It kept on flipping from. And Mendel was fascinated with this clock. And when he was asked why, he says, because this shows you the real advent of time, that every moment is a new page. Every moment you have to say, this is a novelty. Notwithstanding anything that was until this moment, right now is new. And what could I do here? In other words, no matter what was until this moment, no matter what the impediment was until this moment, no matter what the internal, emotional, mental, spiritual impediment that the person was living with or living through or pursuing or doing, that was before. Now is a completely novel reality. You have a blank page. Literally a blank page that never happened before. And it's up to you to write that page. What are you going to write in that moment? The former chief rabbi of England, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, alav shalom, once gave a brilliant mashal. Imagine you're walking in a long corridor where on both sides you see shelves of books upon books upon books upon books, corridor. And you look at each book, and each book has a last name to it. And you realize that these books are ledgers of all the family members that came throughout all the history in that family. And then you come upon the book that has your name to it, your last name. And you open up page number 1. Of course, the forward is given by God. But page number 1, your first ancestor. And you see chapters of his life, his ups and his downs, her ups and her downs, and everything they thought and everything they went through. And you keep on going chapter after chapter, and you see the next generation, and finally you come to yours. Your name. And you see it's not finished. You can't just close that book and just put it back out. You have to realize that you are part of this book, this illustrious book, and you are filling your chapters. So one day your children will read this book too, and your grandchildren, their grandchildren. In other words, every one of us are co-authors of our own books. And in some ways, the Rebbe also said we're editors-in-chief for the main writer, which is Hashem. But every moment is a new page and a new line that you could write. Notwithstanding where it was until this point, you could change everything in one split second. Imagine the power you wield that if in the middle of an argument, you could just stop and say, you know what? We're not continuing this. We don't have to continue. We're the editor-in-chief. We don't have to continue this. We have choice over here. What can I do right now? How could we turn this to be a very magnificent moment? Every moment we're given the ability to do miracles. Every moment. I think we mentioned this once. A group of students once came to the Rebbe, and they weren't so familiar with Chabad, with the Rebbe, with religiosity, but their shaliach told them the Rebbe does miracles. So there's two of these kind of events. One, which Rabbi Posner brought his students, and one of the students says, Rabbi, I know the Rabbi Posner told me you're a tzaddik, and he explained to me what a righteous person is, a person who never makes mistakes. Rabbi, tell me, do you own an eraser? And the Rebbe smiles and says, of course I own an eraser. He says, but Rebbe, why would you need to own an eraser? He says, because yesterday I wrote my thoughts and observations, but today, being that 24 hours has elapsed from yesterday, and I'm already alive for 24 hours extra now, means something had to be added, so I erase yesterday's thoughts and rewrite them through today's lens. And adding and editing us. In other words, we're given the ability not to get stuck in the past. Okay, that was yesterday. This is what I thought yesterday. This is what I said yesterday. How are you revising this today? And that could be done on a momentary level. A separate group of students wanted to enter the Rebbe and asked the Rebbe, one of the students asked the Rebbe the same type of question. Rebbe, I heard you do miracles. Is it true? And the Rebbe smiles and says, all of us could do miracles. He says, well, what do you mean it could do miracles? He says, what's a miracle? What's nature? What's a miracle? Nature is cyclical events, just patterns, repeating themselves over and over. What's a miracle? An overt miracle is when those patterns are suspended or shifted in a completely diametrically opposite direction. Says, in my estimation, the Rebbe says, you have yet to put on tefillin today. If you don't usually put on tefillin, if when leaving my office, you're going to go to the small shul across my office and ask one of the students to put on tefillin with you, that's a miracle. You will shift the patterns. We can't imagine the power that we wield every single moment, in every single situation. Living in the now means experiencing the now through the lens of who you are, what you're here to do. Who are you? You're a piece of God that's invested in a holy body in order to transform the body and the world and itself to be a domain, a hospitable domain for God. Which means every single situation is part and parcel of your mission. And every moment therefore bears that ability in potential. Because in reality, it's not always going to be this humongous miracle that we openly see. Maybe we can't change everything in 1 second. But if we could even advance ourselves, advance our purpose in this world, even by a millimeter, that might be why the moment was created. Just to develop, maybe not to transform, but just to develop a drop. Because the process in itself is often the product. And sometimes that process is the product of that moment. Not just the end goal, but if I was able to take part of that process, that in itself is miraculous. Because think about this. If a person, God forbid, doesn't feel good, he has a pain of some sorts, goes to the doctor, and the doctor starts treating him. Even if the doctor can't take away the ailment altogether or the pain altogether, the fact that the doctor treats it and the pain is somewhat less, subsided just by a drop, well, it's well worth it. Even that experience, that doctor's visit is well worth it because it already minimized the pain by somewhat. In other words, every moment, the advance in itself is well worth that moment. As we said before, one of the Yetzer Hara's tactics is to always make you focus on what you don't have, what's not available to you. But the Yetzer Hara could also utilize that in a holy setting. And that's when it becomes, God forbid, very devastating to the person. For example, in Bereshit, it says that Hashem saw that, and everything that he did was very good. All that he did was very good. Says the Midrash, when it says Hashem saw and he said it's good, that's referring to the Yetzer Tov, to the good inclination. When it says Hashem saw and he said everything is very good, that's Yetzer Hara. Why? Because the Yetzer Hara will always come and tell you that there's perfection, and no matter how good you are, you can never be perfect. Very good. So he'll tell you, okay, so now you'll do the process. Okay, what are you going to get from it? What, are you making miracles? Are you going to shift all of a sudden? It's going to be all of a sudden. So what's the point? All right, so it's going to be a little better, and then it's going to get worse. Okay, so what? So what's the purpose? Just stay in your lane. That need to understand half full, half empty. That's the ploy of Yetzer Hara. But rather, this is what's available now. Utilize it now.
So the pursuit of perfection is the problem in the world.
That in itself is the setup for destruction.
Makes so much sense. I like that. It's a setup for destruction.
It's literally,
sense. There is
literally.
no such thing. Yeah.
As we spoke about it in the other classes, the Alter Rebbe says that most of our emotional and spiritual angst come from the fact that we have a false, delusional sense of self. I need to be perfect. Mm-hmm. My service should be perfect. And my thoughts should be perfect, my emotions should be perfect, and when I'm not, and when I know for a fact they can't be, what's the point? What's the purpose of doing anything then? Because no matter how much I'm going to strive, there's always going to be another issue. But that is the mechanisms of the Yetzer Hara. We spoke about this in Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, in the Chassidus class, we mentioned that Reb Mendel, before he was Reb Mendel, he was Mendel the student. And once Reb Mendel the students came to his mentor and complained, says to him, I have a Yetzer Hara, and no matter what I do, it doesn't go away. I tried this and I tried that, and no matter what, it seems like I keep on ending up with the same Yetzer Hara. And sometimes it's daunting, and sometimes it's discouraging. What do I do? His mentor says to Reb Mendel, we could understand it as somebody who finds himself in the middle of a swamp. They want to get out of the swamp. They don't want to be in the swamp. But they pick up their right foot, take a step out. I want to get out of it. They pick up their right foot, and where does their right foot inevitably end up back in the swamp? Then they pick up their left foot. And for a split second, it's above the swamp. And where does it go back? Right back into the swamp. So a person can think to himself, what's the point? What's the point? I'm just going to get into a swamp. Every single thing is a swamp. Miles of swamp around me. He says, yeah. But when you picked up your right foot and moved it forward. And then the left foot. Yes, you're back in the swamp, but you're not in the same position in the swamp you were before. You already advanced yourself. And that's the process. To tell yourself, well, it's either I'm going to be able to get out of the swamp and I'm going to take these steps, or if not, what's the point? We can understand how that's self-defeating.
So we're looking at progress, not perfection.
Exactly.
That's it.
The product often lies in the process. The process is often the product in itself. I was once thought about something, like in the middle of the night, I wrote it down, and it says, just because you didn't succeed doesn't mean you failed. What is your definition of success? In other words, what do we understand as failure versus success? Ultimate failure is to give up. Feeling empty. What can I do about this? There's nothing I could do. And who am I and what am I? And there's no way I'll be able to change anything. Look, I'm trying and it keeps on going back to... You don't. Every moment in itself is a part of the process. And who knows, for this, maybe your neshama came here for.
Sorry, Rabbi, I have a question. So if the definition of failure, right, is giving up, then the definition of success is keep moving.
Yep.
And that's it.
Keep moving. And understand that chas v'shalom, you're not alone in this situation. And not only you're not alone, if you're in this situation, it means how much Hashem has confidence in you and you alone to transform the situation. He wouldn't put you, a parent of flesh and blood would never chas v'shalom expose their children to danger recklessly just to see if the child could prove himself. We'll throw you into a jungle. If you come out, you're a man. Like, like some tribes in the jungles, they say, okay, your induction into manhood is we're going to put you in the jungle. We'll let you roam by yourself for 30 days, whatever it is. You come out, you're the man. If not, God forbid. God is creating this world by divine providence every single second anew. And He is putting your neshama right here in this moment. And He's with you. As David Amar says, though I should walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall feel no evil, for you are with me. This means even if I'm in the valley of the shadow of death, even if I'm in the darkest of the dark, and even if I got myself into that, I'm not afraid. I know you're with me. We have a shlichut here. There's a mission here. And we have to understand that. We have to internalize this. The theory of relativity, there's an anecdote, says everything's relative. What does that mean? Are 2 hairs too much? Well, it says on a head, 2 hairs is not enough. In a soup bowl that is served to you in a restaurant, it's too much. You have to know. Okay, so maybe in this context is one thing, but in this context is altogether different. Look at yourself and understand how great you are and what could you accomplish right now. You might not be able to attain perfection, but perhaps the perfection right now is in what you're doing. We're not, the aim, as we spoke about in the previous classes, the aim is not to be perfect or not to get it perfect. The aim is to learn how to perfectly maneuver ourselves and respond to ourselves and perfectly respond to the situation to the tune of who we are and what we're here to accomplish. That's the perfection. And that's what we said. That's what we're forbidden to receive interest on a loan. Because in interest, with a loan, we're giving the money to the borrower. But as we said yesterday, in the last class, when the money is transferred to the borrower, the money effectively that instant becomes the sole possession of the borrower. In other words, it no longer belongs to the lender. Unlike someone who rents out a car, the car still belongs to the renter. It's just that the owner of the car. It's just that the renter himself is utilizing it for a certain cost, based on the wear and tear. Well, here the money is transferred there and belongs to the borrower, and from this second on, it no longer belongs to the lender, and therefore, I can't make money of something that doesn't belong to me. And this teaching us live in the now. Right until this moment, you had it. God gave it to you so you could help somebody else, but you can't benefit from that. That's not for you to benefit from. In other words, what this mitzvah is teaching us is to view every experience, every physical item, every single interaction, every up and every down as a stand-alone. Look at what's happening right now. How could you utilize this right now? Not how it could benefit me or not. How could I utilize this right now? There's an old Chinese proverb that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. In Chassidus, it explains that a journey, each one of us are meant to be mahalchim, progressors. We're given the ability to dynamically grow. We don't have to be confined to one nature or another, to one upbringing, or to the past, to the traumas. We don't have to be this way. There's nothing that cements us. But in order to move forward, we need to be able to let where we were standing go. We have to be able to take that step. By taking that step means I can no longer be here. Understanding that perhaps until this moment I belonged here. But from this moment, it's not that this is not good, but right now this is not where my mission is anymore, and I can't be here for that reason. As we're coming to Shavuot, as we know, the Shavuot is a culmination of Pesach, and when Hashem charged Moshe Rabbeinu to go and take the Jewish people out of Egypt, Hashem told Moshe. He gave him the teach, and he told him what to say to Paro. And what did Moshe repeatedly say to Paro? Send my people out so they could serve Hashem in the mountain. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't scream at Paro, you're a human rights violator, you're a dictator, you're a slaveholder. He didn't get into pettiness. Moshe repeatedly just gave the objective truth. Until this moment, the Jewish people belonged in Egypt. Egypt was a necessary step in order to humble us enough so we'll be able to receive the Torah, connect to infinity. But from this moment, we can't be here because our purpose is no longer here. We have to leave. we have to leave. You can't hold us back anymore. Not because something's wrong here, but something's not right here for us anymore. This is the concept of freedom from and freedom to. Freedom from oppression, but then freedom to do what with that freedom? What are you going to do with it?
To become God slaves.
Exactly. Well, and that's the thing. We are, Hashem brought us to serve the Torah on purpose to train us to serve Him. So one of my students asked me, well, then aren't we slaves to our parents, to the teachers, to this and that? They tell us what to do, they don't allow us. But there's a difference. The slavery that was imposed upon us by Paro had no intrinsic benefit whatsoever. It was just there to contain and to destroy, to humiliate, to oppress. The servitude that is given to us is there to reveal our purpose. Like my father once showed me on the violin, in order for the violin to sound as beautiful as it is, the violin cords must be stretched so tight, wound so tight. Otherwise, if those strings are not wound tight, if they're just thrown up next to the violin where they enjoy all their comforts, they won't produce anything. It's specifically being wound tight over hollowness, over emptiness. Toleh Hashem eretz al blima. Hashem hangs the entire universe on silence, on emptiness, on the vacuum. Perhaps that vacuum that you're feeling and your stress that's emanating from that is all there to produce. Don't look at what you don't have. Look at what you are here to accomplish. May it be Hashem's will that Bezat Hashem will utilize our moments, our days, our hours, our days, our weeks correctly according to who we are and what we're here to produce, which is ultimate in this generation. As the Rebbe says, our aim is to bring everything to Mashiach. In other words, not just to refine and elevate sparks, but to bring every one of our abilities and talents in every single situation to its ultimate unbridled level that only our generation can. In other words, unlike all the other generation, we don't technically live under any oppression. The oppressions that lays in this world today are facades. They're not real. They're only skin deep. But we have the ability to bring everything into fullest potential if we could just recognize how intrinsically holy and good we are. So now that we're coming to the holiday of Shavuot, where it's our anniversary with God, we should commit ourselves to our connection with God, because this connection, as we know, and I'm sure you learned, Rebbetzin, that what's called in marriage the Michelangelo effect, right? Michelangelo effect means just like Michelangelo was a sculptor, and he would sit in front of a slab of marble for days and days and days and days, and then see the image in his mind, and then based on what he saw, he started chiseling until all the redundant slabs was completely chiseled away to reveal the actual form. If you think about this, the slab of marble is in itself very valuable. Imagine you're that marble, and something's chiseling at you, and you're like, why? I'm good the way I am. He says, yeah, maybe on the raw surface you're good, but you can't imagine how much goodness you have inside of you. So the Michelangelo effect in marriage is that the marriage in itself chisels away at the redundancy of the person. That in order to relate, you need to realize that there are things that just don't belong, characteristics, thought patterns, and you need to work on it in order to align yourself, groove and move with your spouse, in order to achieve oneness.
Well, that's the whole point of life. Every day you have to try to be better than you were the day before in order to be able to connect to every other
And
person.
that's the point.
Specifically your spouse. Right?
And the same thing specifically our spouse is God.
So the spouse is your mirror image, so you have to kind of see what it is you have to
Exactly.
share.
And as I'm sure you learned, is that your spouse's triggers are exactly what you're here to work on.
Exactly.
That's where exactly your neshama.
Exactly.
That's your tikkun. Because of this, not that God just somehow misaligned these people. Just the opposite. This person's triggers are exactly where your neshama came to work on itself, and in getting out of its comfort zone and chiseling away those redundancies you're giving to that your spouse. But our sages say, more than the receiver of the recipient of the tzedakah benefits, the giver benefits exponentially more. So even though you think you're doing this for your spouse, for your friend, for God, in reality, it's you. Hashem is doing you a favor altogether. So let us commit to adding true positive perception of ourselves, which is to know how good we are, to know how much we could accomplish in this world. And very importantly, to utilize every moment correctly. So let us take upon ourselves to do a mitzvah. Every person knows which mitzvah they're struggling with, or they need to add, or they need to improve, or they need to make even better. If it's tefillin, Shabbat, kosher. But like I tell my students all the time, and you can't keep 25 hours of Shabbat. Can you do 10 minutes of Shabbat for God? An hour of Shabbat, and from time to time improve. From moment to moment. Because each part of the mitzvah, as the Mishnah said last week, and the Alter Rebbe brings, schar mitzvah, the reward of a mitzvah is the mitzvah. The reward of the word mitzvah doesn't only mean commandment, as we said several months ago. Commandment is only because it goes against our natural grain. But ultimate purpose of the mitzvah lays in its etymological root, which is tzevet, connection. The mitzvah is the opportunity to create an eternal bond with God, between the finite and the infinite, the physical and the spiritual, and so on and so forth. And that is a process sometimes. You can't do 25 hours of Shabbat. Can you do 5 minutes, an hour? You start. But the beauty of it, as soon as you open up a little pinhole, Hashem says, open for me a pinhole, I'll open for your entire universe, entire world. Let us take upon ourselves, as we're coming to Shavuot, first and foremost to come to hear the 10 Commandments and bring the kids and the grandkids and everybody to encourage our friends. Have to hear it in person, not on Zoom, not online, not on the telephone, to come to the local shul and hear the 10 Commandments being read on Shabbat morning, to have the dairy kiddush, if you're not allergic to dairy, and make sure the children are part of it. And then to take upon ourselves to add, but not just add, in order to dispense my obligation, but to add in a sense of Mashiach, to what's the best I could do in my limud Torah, in learning Torah, in the performance of mitzvot, and in tzedakah, and davening in tzedakah. What can I add and bring it to the best of the best? We should merit to receive the Torah happily and inwardly.